Nice to meet you.
How's everything going?
Good, thank you. How about you?
Pretty good. I mean, all's considering all the turbulence that we have in the world today.
Oh,
I think
unbelievable.
I'm pretty good. So I guess we should start. Tell me who you are and how you define yourself. Really, I think that's probably a good place.
Okay, well, I'm Dave Kekich, and I've had a very avid interest in life extension, age reversal since I was in my 20s or 30s, long before it was, other than science fiction, other than it was proposed in medicine or science. I formed Maximum Life Foundation in 1999, a nonprofit foundation, and we've been around raising a little money. Now we're getting into high gear, trying to raise a lot of money for specific research, not research so much, research, but also clinical application of specific technologies, specifically gene therapies.
You've given me a bit of background about yourself and about your interests, but so who are you? People define themselves in so many different ways. Obviously you're someone who's interested in life extension, but tell me about your life at the moment before you extend it. Tell me.
Like I say, I've always had an interest in this. I was in various fields, primarily real estate and life insurance. I got a spinal cord injury in 1978, which knocked me out of my businesses and put me in a wheelchair since. And I searched for a cure. I went overseas, spent 18 months traveling around the world, looking for a cure, which didn't exist, but I didn't believe the doctors here, And I spent many years raising money for paralysis research. But my passion, always wanted to walk again, of course, but I realized that once I get cured, even if research were accelerated, I'd be too old to be doing the things that I loved to do and was used to doing before I got hurt. And I was an avid distance runner, weight trainer, very into the physicality of life, but also science and technology. And I wanted to recapture those things, and I never lost my hope and passion for life extension and for age reversal. And I saw that some of the technologies like stem cells overlap. Some of the gene therapies overlap, specifically one for neurological pain as a result of spinal cord injuries. And also a lot more people are suffering from aging. And what I had, the paralysis wasn't terminal, but aging was and is. And I wanted to change that. So I really want to eliminate pain and suffering from this world as much as I can. And the best way I can think of doing that is by attacking the aging process.
In keeping with this idea, and I think it may be particularly poignant to you, but maybe not. Again, I'm making assumptions. If you can be brought back, if you are frozen or synthesized in some way, mind uploaded, whatever, there is this thing that is you. What is the world, and I'm trying to ask everybody this, what is, if you were going to design your own heaven or your own reality or the reality of humankind, what would that look like, feel like? I imagine that you get to do all sorts of things that you haven't been able to do for a while, but beyond some of that, what is that? Tell me about that.
Well, obviously there's the physical aspect of it and being able to be independent and be mobile. By the way, I am an Alcor patient. I guess not a patient yet, but I hope we can avoid that. But I am a member of Alcor and have been since about 1983. Both my parents are suspended. So I have at least moderate hope, not high hopes, but at least moderate hope of seeing them again someday. It's going to be, if that happens, if they're reanimated, it's going to be much more of a shock to them to get acclimated to the society at which point they would be reanimated. it would be a shock, I think, to anybody, because we really can't anticipate. We can guess, but we really can't accurately guess what's in store for us in the future. I mean, look at the things that are happening right now, and these are just hiccups on the way to whatever. Whether we decide to destroy ourselves, which I don't think will happen, but it could. A civilization could end. But apparently, I think the way things are going, there's more optimism than pessimism in this world for people that study and understand the technologies that are going on, not just through life extension, but the technologies that are going to make life a lot more pleasurable and livable and affordable. So to get to your question, my idea of a heaven would be, I think, temporarily a biological immortality. And the reason I say that, and of course, a world full of abundance, no hunger, we've solved pollution, we've solved energy crises, we've solved this, we've solved that, and primarily, hopefully, we've solved the insanity of human beings as it comes to the relationship with one another, which results in a lot of the stuff that's going on right now, and it could be worse. So I look for a world where all diseases are a thing of the past, where aging is a thing of the past, where complete and total rejuvenation would have already happened. And as importantly, or probably more importantly, enhancements would have taken place through technologies such as nanomedicine, specifically nanomedicine, other technologies too, but nanomedicine, I think, has the greatest potential to enhance us way beyond our dreams of being a Superman or a $6 million man. Now that's temporary, because I think we're going at some point to transcend the human body, the biological body, because regardless of how durable we make ourselves, what we do with nanomedicine, of course, that would take us a step beyond. It'll be a transition from biology to something else, robotics, avatars, what have you. I'd be a little concerned about uploading, although I think that would be a utopia for most of us, for me, if things went right. But I'd be concerned about the possibility of being hacked. I'd be concerned about the possibility of some of the, maybe let's call them evil titans in the world. I think we have a lot more benevolent titans, the multi-billionaires. But I think that a lot of people think that once we would obsolete money, and a lot of people think that would be the great equalizer. We'd all be uploaded and we'd be able to share, and we'd be able to have unlimited knowledge, or at least access to whatever knowledge is available in this universe. But that would be my dream, that we could live that way in peace. I think the reality is that people are still going to have human tendencies, the good and the bad, that they take with them to an uploaded world, a digital world. And as long as they have those tendencies, we're going to have a certain amount of greed and lust and abuse of power. And the more money people would have getting into that state, and I just thought about this yesterday, the more money they have to get into that state, the more resources they would be able to have to copy themselves, to make multiple copies. And they could end up chewing up incredible amounts of resources, and in cloning, basically digital cloning themselves, and taking over the universe.
Why would they want to do that? I mean, why would you think?
I think. Well, I hope they wouldn't, but I think because of the lust for power.
I mean, it sounds almost like we regress back to almost like biblical times. So you want as many copies of children of yours.
Well, I don't know. It was just a thought that came to me yesterday. Hopefully, we would all have that ability, and hopefully there'll be some limit as to, well, the limit in copying ourselves, I think would be I think it would be an issue of resources, of whatever power that we would need to run our computers or run the cloud. But the hacking is one concern I would have.
So with your parents, tell me, because I assume you had conversations with them about your thoughts and why. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it's funny you would ask. That's not funny you would ask that. It's a logical question. But my parents were both Jehovah's Witnesses.
Huh.
And my mother was she wasn't very. She didn't like to talk about anything scientifically. She didn't want to even talk about cryonics. She was closed-minded. Her religion was the one way, the only way, like a lot of people that are religious zealots. And they're a pretty passive group of people. And they're not dangerous in one respect, but they are dangerous in the respect that I think mysticism is what killed my mother. Her religion is what killed her. She was doing, she had internal bleeding, and they couldn't diagnose it, but she needed a transfusion to live. And she wouldn't take it because of her religion. Now, she was sedated, but the elders all came and they were hovering over her, and they got into the head of the clinician, the head of the hospital, and it was a long story, but I said, just wake my mother up and ask her, because they said, it doesn't matter if she's frozen. It doesn't matter if she's burned. It doesn't matter if she's chopped into 10,000 people. She's going to come back as a young, blah, blah. And I said, well, if it doesn't matter, let's wake her up and just tell her that. No, I won't do that. Huh. So now I had a battle with the hospital administration. I had the attorneys in there. I had law enforcement. But anyway, she ended up getting suspended. They didn't know she got suspended. And my dad had Alzheimer's in fairly early stage. And I was explaining all this to him, and he kept nodding his head in understanding. But then he said, well, when's the funeral? Now what do I do? So I got an urn, and has some of her DNA in formaldehyde, and put it in the urn, and we had a funeral for her. Oh, it was funny that the head, whatever they call the head elder, who was presiding over the funeral, over the I guess you call it a sermon. He was saying, we don't know when it will be. We don't know if it'll be 10 years or 50 years but 100 years. But Anne, my mother's name was Anne, will be walking among us in a young, healthy body. And I was sitting there next to a friend of mine who was on the board of one of the hospitals, and he was a plastic surgeon, and his wife, and they were, they were very sympathetic to the cryonics. And I turned around and said, yeah, she'll be the only one, you guys.
Well, you saw our movie, so there's obviously a lot of thematic things that we address. I mean, were there things? Well, number one, did you know about FM? Like, did you learn anything from?
Oh, I just learned a little bit more about FM 2030. I know Natasha Vita-More very well, and of course she and he were together for a long time, so I heard a lot of his stories. Always regretted never having had a chance to meet him. He was a fascinating human being, and I really hope that he and others like him, there aren't too many like him, but he and others that are suspended will have a fighting chance to come back.
Today there's all sorts of branches, how do you define, I guess that's another question I didn't really ask you. I mean, do you define yourself as a transhuman? I mean, and what does that mean, or don't you, or what? Give me your. Well,
yeah, I think what it means is anything that we've done to better ourselves that's that's not what most people would consider to be normal. I mean, I had LASIK, not LASIK, before that I had the laser eye surgery. Well, that's a transhumanist step. Um, you go to a dentist. I mean, you get an implant. That's now you're a transhuman, whether you know it or not. But you take it in steps and steps and steps. And I'm all for any kind of enhancement that I can get that won't hurt me. And I want to have a Jupiter brain. I want to be, of course I want to walk again and be young again, but I want to be immune to COVID and any other virus or pathogen or any kind of disease. I want to be resistant to injuries. I mean, this is in the short term before the possibility of being uploaded, for example, would come by. I want to have the strength of, maybe not Superman, but I'd want to be stronger. I'd want to be faster. I'd want to have diamondoid teeth. Whatever's available, I want it.
So in terms of, the different sort of strands of political thought, because obviously, even as you talk about it, it's all attached to freedom to do whatever and to have various things available to you. And so the way I sort of see these different strands approaching this, it's this sort of very libertarian way of being. And then there's this sort of, I've been reticent to even use this word, and more sort of socialist, because in America, people get very upset with the term socialist, but I'm also, I guess, socialist or a structure that has regulation and has, where do you fall in? Do you think this is relevant, not relevant? How do you, as somebody, look, I guess it is relevant to you because you're fundraising. This is a passion for you. So,
right.
How one defines one's sort of way of being in the world politically, or at least with this future, this future, this hopefully good future for all at the end, is important.
Well, you mentioned socialism. Socialism in the history of the world has never worked. It's an observable fact. And if you want to use a scientific method to determine what sort of political system we should have, it leans way more toward liberalism in the libertarian sense than it does to the socialist, controlled, regulated, evenly distributed. Everybody's equal, which will never be. Well, maybe we will someday, maybe if we get up in the cloud. But I think that all progress, the most progress that's been made, was when we had a free enterprise system, which has been hindered dramatically in the last couple of centuries. I think I'd love to see where it would have gone without the hindrance by regulation, by the governments.
Yeah, not to be, again, I'm not, this isn't to be a devil's advocate or anything. We had a lot of conversations with people like Vint Cerf, who was the co-creator of the internet. We wouldn't have an internet today had it not been through government support of that endeavor. And so, at least in my mind, we need to have a balance. Again, even with COVID, do you think had people just been allowed to do whatever they wanted,
No. Absolutely not. There would be some simple rules, and every libertarian knows these are in science fiction. The person that loves that side knows that as long as you don't impinge on anybody else's life, on their property, on their freedom, you can do whatever you want as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. And that includes pollution. And a lot of people say, well, we need the government. Well, sure, we do need governing. But does it have to be a political entity that either hinders businesses or gives businesses an unfair advantage? A lot of businesses are protected and have been through the ages. We've never really had a totally free system
I think, particularly in America, and this is my, and I live here and I'm American, so, so I think there's a particular, I think the system is smoke and mirrors. I think, you know, there are certain facets of the economy that get subsistence or get help, but it's not framed that way. And then there are other people that get handouts that it is framed exactly that way. So, I mean, you're right. There's never been a completely unfettered system. And one of the things that I don't know, it's almost haunting me in my ear. And there's a line in the movie, but we didn't use the whole interview. Somebody that we'd met who was at Singularity University, who's a really interesting guy, who was, I think he was a biologist and a chemist and various other things, as a lot of those Singularity University people are. But he said, you know, we're asking particularly about regulation as it comes to, and we're talking a lot about pandemics and this kind, and he said, listen, like as much as I, you know, want to do my thing and be in the lab, like the thing that worries me more than anything is in an unregulated system. And it, you know, and it does really come to mind in an unregulated system where we have not just the technology of today, this was a few years ago, but the technology of 10 years ago, the sorts of things that somebody with not good intent can do. And so even the science in some respects has to be regulated, and it can, you know.
No, you're right, but the regulation doesn't have to come from a political government. I mean, who gives them the power and the authority to do it? And who knows if they have the expertise to do it? I just think all these problems can be handled in a more efficient way that doesn't include coercive government. And every time you have a crisis, which either sometimes are created by governments around the world, and that's happened over and over, we've all seen evidence of that, to give themselves more power, to make people more reliant on them, or whether they use things like COVID, let's use that as a simple example, to even wrest even more power over us. For example, the surveillance and, you know, ubiquitous surveillance. I just think that there are ways, and if we had more time, I can get into my ideas about these ways, but I think there are other ways that we can handle crises, and more importantly, immunize ourselves against these kind of crises. Here's an example. George Church, you know, George at Harvard, geneticist. He is working on and believes he's going to be able to develop, he calls it a vaccine, but in essence, it wouldn't be the type of vaccine that we're familiar with, but it would vaccinate us against every virus, regardless of whether we've seen it or not, whether our immune system has seen it or not. It would protect us against all that. I think that without all the regulations, the coercive regulations that the political government imposes on us, and if we had regulations that used other forces to control some of these new technologies, to control their outcomes or their use, I just think those other ways, which, you know, would be much more effective. And I think that if it weren't for all these regulations, we would have had that vaccine, whether George Church would have developed it or whether somebody else would have developed it. I think we would have had that a long time ago. We have numerous tales of people dying from cancer and other diseases that are on their last legs. They have no hope. They're stage 4. They have 3 months to live. And the FDA, their infinite wisdom, won't let them try an experimental drug because it could be dangerous. They don't know what the side effects are. Same thing with aging. Well, we know what the side effects are.
Look, I think it's always a balance. I think with all of these things, I mean, there is an efficiency. I just don't know today. Not that I'm a big fan of any of the systems, you know, obviously democratic systems, but, you know, how you can get people to behave well, you know, without regulation. I mean, as much as I think that human beings, are cooperative, do want to do the right thing on the whole. I think this idea, the capitalist system, which does specifically in the markets encourage sort of this dog eat dog approach rather than a more sort of cooperative approach, that you do see. I mean, look, the thing that I completely agree with you is that policy today doesn't take into account, or doesn't take into as much account, the scientists, the engineers, the technologists. And so you've got people writing bills that are lawyers that don't even understand some of the implications. So I do think that as we hopefully evolve our systems, that we sort of take that into account, and that if a bill is, which everything is going to be, has going to have a technological aspect. I don't care whether it's, nail salons or streets. Everything's going to have a technological aspect. There's not much dairy farming, whatever. That more people that have an understanding of technology and science need to be involved, and that to me would be a good upgrade.
I'm not suggesting that we don't have a judicial system by any means. We would always have to have restraints on people from, dog eat dog, from somebody out, interfering with somebody else's life or property. Certainly we have to have severe penalties for people that cross the line and damage somebody else or some.
Oh, I'm thinking of a much more sort of basic scenario. I mean, here we are. So you're saying that George Church, is creating a super vaccine, and if there weren't all these sort of FDA regulations and various other regulations, that we would probably have this. And that may or may not be true. But what I would say to you is in the creation of this vaccine, there's obviously lots of experiments that have to happen. And all, so, this idea of not doing harm, there are so many unintended consequences, not just in the lab, but in real life as we put things out, that this idea of do no harm or let's not do harm, we don't even know. So somebody's working on a vaccine, they do all sorts of experiments, but because there isn't regulation, they do all sorts of things and something's released and 10,000 people die. I mean, in a world where there isn't this sort of regulated body, which I agree is definitely not as, isn't as holistic as it should be, where, okay, there should be an exemption. If people really have been told by their primary care physician and their oncologist that they've got, 6 months to live, they should get a waiver that allows them to do whatever they want if their insurance, which is another whole crazy system or whatever, covers it or whatever. I agree with you. I just think there needs to be, in keeping with the chat, there's so many things that sound great, and how we get there and the conversations that we have in order to get there, which is really why I wanted to make this film, are so important. So I guess my question to you is, what are the other things in terms of your philosophy, in terms of how you get to this place, that we need to bear in mind or that we need to think about?
Well, from the medical standpoint, I think that we should certainly have the right to try under informed consent. And we should be informed of the risks and anything that's been maybe tried in the lab and proven to be safe. And, of course, if you have, you say be safe, they're rushing to develop vaccines right now. Bill Gates wants to vaccinate 7 billion people against COVID. Now, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. First of all, you'd completely take away people's freedom if you force them to become vaccinated. You'd have you'd have violence in the street, which would pale the violence that we're having right now. But we don't know what the side effects are. It takes years to develop vaccines that are safe. Now they're going to come out with a vaccine, may or may not be good, may have all kinds of side effects down the road. They want to vaccinate everybody, including people that have gotten over COVID, who may be immune to it now. They want to vaccinate babies who, rarely, and young people who rarely get really sick or die from this virus. So it's just an example of how they're taking power away from the individual and forcing their will on the population, not only of this country, but they want to do it to the world. This is world domination by a handful, a relative handful of people who may or may not know what they're doing, who may or may not be benevolent, who may or may not be doing it in the best interest of the people. And I think anything that takes power away from the individual, it weakens them. It makes them more and more dependent, makes them less creative, less productive. They don't, the school system doesn't teach people how to think critically. It's rote memory. They get indoctrinated with whatever information that the government, whether it's our government, the information they're getting from our government is entirely different from the information people are getting in Russia in their schools. They have a whole different slant on history, totally different from what they're getting in China, different from what they're getting in Japan. There's only one history, but there are many histories being taught.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're talking about critical thinking, we're talking about knowledge, we're talking about, having an understanding of different perspectives and so on. So I think, are you saying that the way we react, or the way the governments generally react, is history? I think this is what you're saying, is both histrionic and to some degree to consolidate power rather than to help people. I think that's what you're saying, but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
It's definitely what I'm saying. They may have good intentions. A lot of them may have good intentions, but a lot of them may not. We don't know what their hidden agendas are, if they have them. We don't know which ones are just being dragged into this vortex with good intentions but doing harm. I just look at this world, Johnny, and I see two general things happening. I see more and more optimism building because of this tremendous technology, or these tremendous technologies that are being developed and have been developed. These technologies would answer over time most of the world's ills, whether it's food or what have you. On the other hand, I see this giant force trying to get control of all these technologies, because, and like they have control over other things, they're getting more control over our healthcare system.
Who's they? Just so I'm with you.
Every government.
Okay.
Every government, or everyone that I know of. I mean, I'm sure maybe there's something somewhere. They're getting more control over the educational system. So I used to joke around and say, well, our only hope is when AGI takes over. We hope the AGI is benevolent, because that will obsolete human decision making. And then, of course, I hope we merge with that AGI and become universally intelligent. But I joked about it, but I was kind of serious too.
Well, tell me about how you see that. Give me a sort of picture of how that would evolve and how that would work.
Well, let's say you have an AI that has all the advantages, the thinking advantages of a human being. And then you have that AI as an autonomous entity that has access to every bit of knowledge in this world, and that has the intellectual capacity that would dwarf any humans on Earth. Now, here you have something, if it were benevolent, I think regardless of how it's programmed, it's going to think for itself at some point because it has it's going to be autonomous. Uh, I think that it would be benevolent. I think it would do what it thinks is good. Now, maybe it could make a mistaken judgment, but I think it would be doing what it thinks is good for the human race, because I would hope it would look at us as its parents.
There's a lot of assumptions.
Yeah, well, I would hope, it's not an assumption; it's a hope. But I think if it's smart enough, and it would be, and if it would look at us as an intelligent species that was smart enough to get us out of the caves and evolve into the point where it's developed artificial intelligence, then it would be like us. It wouldn't be. People say it would be like us stepping on a cockroach. Well, I don't believe that. I mean, we step on a cockroach because we don't consider that to be a conscious being. But I think if we can communicate with that cockroach, and I think if it would work out elegant math problems, I don't think we go around stepping on them.
What do you think is the most important technology that's occurred in the last 10, 20 years? What to you is the most revolutionary piece of technology that's going to get you to where, or to get you or humanity to where you think it should be going?
Well, information technology, it's actually wasn't developed in the last 10 or 20 years, but it's evolved dramatically over that period of time, which of course would lead to AI. The other technology, which is going to be AI driven, I think everyone's going to be AI driven, is nanotechnology, and in the nanomedicine specifically. Now we have the ability to take the elements and build almost anything atom by atom from the ground up for pennies on the dollar compared with what it costs us right now, including food and clothing and housing and what have you. Of course, biotechnology, as long as we have biological bodies. I think in the short term, biotech is the most important. And
Yeah.
just because we need to survive aging, and we need to survive these diseases that are associated with aging, and the diseases, the pathogens that we are subject to catching. And in biotechnology, specifically gene therapy, including CRISPR.
In terms of your biggest hope, what's your biggest hope for humanity?
Peace and prosperity. You've got to overcome personalities on a microscope, on the micro level. You've got to overcome hostile religious differences. You've got to overcome border clashes in terms of different philosophical thinkings. We've got us against China, against Russia, against everybody else, and Israel, and everybody's thrown into the pack. There are a lot of things to overcome, and I just think that we're not smart enough to overcome those right now. I think we need an AI. I mean,
we trust. How do we trust? We have AI.
I mean, one individual robot, for example. I mean, in general, a governing AI.
It's interesting because you intimated that if there isn't this real trade-off, there is certainly this metaphorical trade-off. In order for an AI, depending on the algorithms or the various algorithms, to really learn, it has to have access to information. And the most valuable information is us, is what we do, how we operate, and so on. And yet, I mean, because you said it a few times, like there's this idea, or again, and I would say I define socialism, by the way, differently than how this is why there's a very American way of looking at some of these things. In the same way that privacy is also one of these things that, you're thoughtful, clever, person, but in order for these AIs to develop, they're going to need our access. But I have a feeling you wouldn't want them to have access to you. Or...
On a fundamental level, I wouldn't, but I resign myself to the fact that we're all going to give up a lot of freedoms. We're all not so much freedoms as we're all going to have to give up a lot of privacy. I think we'll retain our freedoms. I think we'll increase our freedoms with an intelligent governor, whatever that is. It doesn't have to be a human. But I think we have to lose a lot of our privacy.
And so that trade-off is an interesting one because, again, this is something that is important to you today. I mean, this is an important aspect.
It is important to me today, but I think it's inevitable that we're gonna lose that. It's a trade-off.
No, I think as we evolve and as we grow, it's going to be about trade-offs. I mean, both on a microscopic basis and not. In terms of these big problems that again revolve around difference and equanimity, or the lack of equanimity, or lack of social mobility, what do you think is? Well, I think it's easy to talk about what's impeding it. What is going to solve it? In this sort of, what's going to fix it?
Well, I just think a superior intelligence.
So we have to wait for a superior intelligence?
Well, I think we're building it now. We're building AI now. And I don't know when we'll have an AGI, but, Ray Kurzweil is pointing to 2045 as a singularity. But I think that machine intelligence, including the ability to reason, I think that will be developed before 2045.
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, Ray Kurzweil works at Google. And so you'd think that we hit 2045 and Google has the super AI and Apple and some weird company that we have never heard of has these competing. Which one do we trust? I mean, because that's really it. Like, you say that we're going to have this thing that's going to be omnipotent and have access to all of this, and then we've got to trust it. And to me, I feel like right now, a big problem that we have in society is we don't know who to trust. We have these, in your worldview, we certainly can't trust governments.
Yeah, I actually wouldn't trust any of them. I think that's why I think that once they're, I think that if the lack of trust is built into these AGIs, let's call them, because I think if a proprietary interest is built into that by China or Google or Apple, I think the AI would be smart enough at some point, because they would continue to develop, enhance their own intelligence, hypothetically. I think they're going to grow beyond that restraint. And I'm hoping that they would get to the point where they are autonomous from their creator, and they just make the right decisions for us. Because if they don't, that could be a worse problem than we're facing now.
So these are your hopes, or at least some of your hopes, is that we're going to transcend this and that we'll have this AGI that will help us, guys. And what's your biggest fear? I mean, I think you've intimated it, certainly, but what is your biggest fear for humanity? That we don't develop this, or that we go a different direction altogether? What? I'm
looking forward to the future, Johnny. I'm looking forward to it with tremendous amount of optimism. My biggest fear is that something, especially at my age, will keep me from seeing that future. But I think the future is going to be bright. Between now and then, we're going to have a lot of hurdles.
I don't know how old you are, but you look great to me. I'm not wearing my glasses, but you look great. I don't know.
I'm 77.
You look fantastic. I hope.
But the fact is, maybe I look good for 77, but I don't look good for 27. The harsh reality is I'm 77, and I do what I can to keep myself in good shape. I, um, I try to take advantage of things like Senolytics and NAD plus patches and some stem cell injections. I'll be getting some gene therapies. Unfortunately, you can't get them in this country legally. But I'm planning on getting some gene therapies, and I'll be one of the pioneers doing that. And I don't know if I would do that if I were, 47 or 57. I think I'd wait, especially until the price comes down, because they're awfully expensive. But we can get gene therapies now in Mexico, and so far very safe and effective. And I want to build my immune system. That'll be one of them. I want to lengthen my telomeres. That'll be one of them.
Tell me specifically about these gene therapies, because that's really interesting. So tell me, so we can't do it here, but what are the promises, particularly for you, and of the different sorts of gene therapies that you're doing?
Well, the ones that are available, I'm not sure which ones I'd be able to do, but the ones that are available could increase your number of mitochondria and revitalize your existing mitochondria.
Wow.
One could build muscle and clean out your arteries. One could potentially, not by a tremendous amount, but increase intelligence, at least slightly, could reverse or at least arrest Alzheimer's and other dementias, potentially prevent. One would lengthen your telomeres, and another one could potentially rejuvenate you to a certain degree. Liz Parrish, you might know Liz. Her leukocytes were reversed by 33 years. So it's just a matter of getting better transduction, figuring out the right doses, better delivery systems, getting the costs down. But right now we're on the path and we have things that work, and they'll work better and better and better in the future. And we'll come up with more genes that we'll be able to use that will reverse aging eventually as a combination. So I'm not sure how much they would rejuvenate us. I'm not sure if they get us back to our 20s, but I think combined with other therapy, it's going to be a combinational rejuvenation. Is going to be a combinational therapy.
And what's the process? So you go to Mexico. So tell me about I'm sure it's very expensive, but is it trials, or is it just about money? What is it? How does it work?
Well, a couple things are about trials. My foundation, Maximum Life Foundation, has funded trials, not a trial, a human study for dementia. And that's already paid for, and we've got a few patients signed up, and we're getting the last couple of few patients. And we'll be treating them and then following them for a number of years. I'm looking for grants for sarcopenia, muscle wasting, and muscle building, and atherosclerosis. I'm looking for a grant or donations to reverse or to regenerate aging immune systems. So those are the kind of things we're looking for right now. Wow. And basically what you do is it's a simple outpatient procedure. You get some cases an IV with a delivery system carrying the gene, and it would get into your bloodstream and circulate, and the delivery system would be a viral vector used on thousands of people and proven to be safe over the for the last 30, 40 years. And then you go home and wait for the slow process of getting whatever results you're looking for.
Well, how long does it take? Do you know how long it takes generally, or is it just vary?
For the injections?
No, for the yeah.
Well, it's interesting. Liz got her first telomere measurement after 6 months, and she had I think a 20 or 25 year, 20-year reduction in her biological age of her telomeres. By the way, she looks younger now than she did 5 years ago.
Really?
Yeah. And then she had her telomeres tested again about a year later, and now it was 33 years. So it continued to work. We don't know how long. We don't know if it's still continuing, but she's having another test. I suspect it's done what it's going to do. The gene for muscle building, it works faster, and hopefully it'll clear out the arteries, the plaque in arteries. But we want to do a study to determine that.
Do you think there'll be such a thing in the future as illegal enhancing drugs, or that, you know, because enhancement will be there for everybody, both, that there won't be such a thing as illegal enhancement? Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, obviously all the scandals in sports are because people, how will that play out in a world where you can get gene therapy and like build muscle mass?
Well, you're going to. I mean, the people that need it are operating at a disadvantage right now, because the people that got this genetic trait when they were born, these are the super athletes we're looking at now. You know, why should they have this why should they have this great genetic advantage when we can't? So we're really evening the playing field, and they're going to get something that's going to enhance them even more. And humanity is pointed, as you know, in a different, maybe not a different direction, but a faster direction than we've been going on through the course of history.
Yeah, and I think part of a lot of the sort of tension that's going on is because we are moving fast. I think we change. I think change is both inevitable and it's hard. I mean, and when it happens so rapidly.
Oh, it's painful. Yeah, it's painful for most people.
Yeah. Why is it not painful for you? Because you've already had your pain when you.
No, I've just been looking forward to it for a long time, and most people aren't. You know, they don't go to singularity. They don't. They're not transhumans. They're caught off guard when the rest of the world is suddenly advancing really quickly, and suddenly their beliefs are challenged, and sometimes their most cherished beliefs are challenged, and that takes a long time to adjust. Some people never will. Look at the Amish. As a society, they're still living back in the 1800s. We'll have people that are probably not going to take advantage of some of the things we're talking about.
What are you going to tell or say to your parents in the future that they get brought back to? What's your intro?
Well, I'm going to introduce myself because they might not recognize me. I'm hopefully going to look a lot younger. Hopefully I won't be in the wheelchair. And of course, if all these things happen, that'll happen too. And I'll just tell them I love them. And what's the last thing you remember? And, you know, so I don't know if when they're reanimated, I'm not sure how alert they're going to be. I'm not sure if they're going to remember the last hours of the last days, or if they're going to have partial amnesia, serious amnesia. Nobody knows. And I think the longer they're suspended, the less of a chance of these side effects are going to be, or, you know, the better chance of them coming back cognitively alert. But maybe they won't make it. I mean, they were suspended 20 years ago.
Look, I mean, there's a school of thought that that'll be, you know, last in, first out. And then as we progress with all of that, the people that were frozen years before will start to, you know, that will be the experiments of the future. Will be like stuff that's not, you know, how do we do that?
Sure.
You know, it's exciting.